first of all, I have listened, 3 episodes already this week. I think 3. The immediate reaction when SMU was still playing. I'm going to Saks.com. I want to buy that underwear, Chip. I'm telling you. How you doing?
Hey, listen, we're concerned about ball placement and ball security.
No question.
You know?
No question about it.
It's week 1, and you can't get in your own way. You know, so it's and look, it's not just that. You know, you got shirts, you got shorts, hoodies, the whole repertoire. Great cooling material over there at Saks.com.
Unbelievable. That was just absolutely cracking me up. All right, is it really that much of a hot take? I'm not, mathematically speaking, of course, Florida State is still in it. It's week 1. It's one loss. But practically speaking, aren't they a massive long shot to be included in the playoff?
No, because I don't think that they have fallen behind the rest of the ACC. And the ACC, I believe, still has a path to the playoff, right? So
the only way they can get in is through winning the league. They're not going to be an at-large team.
And I am saying that practically, I don't think they're that far out of the race to win the league. I think that the loss to Georgia Tech, combined with what needs to happen for them to get better and win at Notre Dame, and win enough games to get to the ACC championship game. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the football side before we talk about the resume.
Right.
But so much of what's going to happen when it comes down to, the 9, the 10, the 11 seed, spots that the ACC is going to be fighting for in an at-large spot are going to come down to tiebreakers. And depending on what Georgia Tech does, if Georgia Tech's not the ACC champion, that's going to look like a bad loss. And that's going to be something that could end up hurting them. So I think that I'm not ready to say that they're out of it, because if Miami loses at Florida and if Clemson gets dominated by Georgia, who's the monster in the ACC that you're going to say is that much better than Florida State? So I believe that Florida State can still win the ACC. They weren't my pick before the game. They still are not my pick even after the result. But I'm not ready to write them out of the college football playoff, because I do still think they are one of the most talented rosters in the conference.
All right, so here's Chip Patterson, who joins us every Wednesday. Because what I saw, and I allow for it's week 1, things can get better. But what I saw from Florida State in week 1 was a team that was second best on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, not dynamic in the passing game, and maybe that DJ Uiagalelei, maybe Georgia Tech basically gave him no credit and basically said, go ahead, you beat us. We're not letting your running game beat us. But I just don't see that many areas for Florida State to drastically improve, because it wasn't like they were a penalty machine or they were just mistake after mistake after mistake. They were just okay. And I think they were.
I think they got out-coached.
I agree with that too.
Yeah. I think they can improve with their coaching, their game planning, with their play calling. I said this on the Cover 3 podcast. They looked like a team that didn't know what they were. They looked like a team that believed that on talent alone, they could go in and they could just figure it out on the fly. Because on the very first drive of the game, they marched right down the field behind that offensive line, which I do think is still great. It's just that when you've got 5 offensive linemen, you know what it's really hard to do? Block 7 rushers.
Yeah. Well, is Florida State allowed to keep in a tight end or have a fullback? Are they? I'm sorry. Had they changed the rules? I know they changed a lot of college football rules.
Back to coaching.
Yeah.
I think Florida State can be a lot better, because I fundamentally do believe they are a really, really talented roster, and I think they were ill prepared for that game, and Georgia Tech was better prepared for that game. In terms of the variance here, let's be careful that we don't overreact. What if Haynes King doesn't fall on the ball? That, it almost like loses the game for Georgia Tech.
Right.
It's not like the Yellow Jackets dominated them in terms of the statistics of the game.
No.
And, hey, this was the least amount of possessions in an FBS
Awesome.
game since 2020.
110 total plays. We have 100. We have 110 plays sometimes with one team in a college football game. We had a total of 110 plays. It was like shooting it into my veins. I loved everything about it.
So, what's happening is Florida State was rotating bodies like it was a college football game with 150 plays, and it was an NFL game. And I know Bud mentioned this on the podcast, but Patrick Willis never came out of the game once. So why are you pulling your linebackers out of the game? I think that there's a lot of room for Florida State to improve. And then on the DJ part, I agree. I think that Georgia Tech said, we don't believe that you can move the ball down the field, but I also believe that DJ stepped up and led a drive that they had to have with 2 fourth-down conversions. And so he clearly still has some of the playmaking that he was able to show during his time at Clemson and Oregon State, where I know it's hard for people to remember, but Wake Forest beats Clemson in that high-scoring affair unless DJU leads the touchdown drives that they need several years ago. There are games that DJ did win for the Clemson Tigers before he departed, and he did have himself some success out there in Corvallis as well. DJ is who he is. The word out of Florida State was they weren't going to ask him to be something that he's not.
Right.
The word out of Florida State was also that they were disappointed with the wide receivers.
Yeah.
So can the wide receivers get better? Maybe. But can you be a little bit better with the way that you call your offense and the way that you set it up? I think absolutely. So Florida State, in a game that was historically low possession, low play, went into it like it was a preseason game where they were figuring things out on the fly, and they ran out of time and couldn't get off the field.
Yeah, also when they were gifted the bad snap or the snap that went through King's hands and a 3rd and 18, I think I texted this to you, I don't understand why they didn't treat it like a 3rd and 1. Like any yard. They knew the kicker had a good leg. The only reason he missed the other kick, the 50-some-odd yarder, was because he was basically lined up on the right hash and just left it out to the right. I mean, when Georgia Tech picked up, 12 yards, 13 yards, that was a goner. So anyway, it's fine. I'm not even lamenting the loss of my live Florida State plus 350 during that final drive, counting on a missed field goal or some other mistake. I almost caught a break, and that made it fun for me at the end of the game, even though it was a loss. Chip Patterson is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. You mentioned, I don't know, you may not have mentioned, I've talked about it before, Miami at Florida on Saturday, and we're going to get to State and Carolina here in a second. But Miami at Florida on Saturday, you've got two teams that both are looking at this as a must-win. And they're must-wins for the coaches, maybe more so for Billy Napier of Florida even than Mario Cristobal at Miami. But they're must-wins. And for Miami, their must-win is probably at a different level simply because they have a chance. They have the roster to win this league this year. How do you – what is your focus when you're looking at this game?
How both of these teams – decide to approach the idea of pace and tempo, because we have athletes all over the field here. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to get out and run, you can get out and run. It's also going to be about 90 degrees, about 70% humidity at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, partly cloudy in Gainesville. How are you going to manage? Who is deeper? Who is in better shape, better condition? Those choices become very interesting because Miami, you would think, because they've got all that incredible skill talent and Cam Ward, that they would want to get out there and go fast. And their offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson, at times during his coaching past, has gone out and gone fast. but he didn't do it as much last year, and I think it's because he didn't trust the quarterback play that they had last year. So I think if Miami goes out there and they start wanting to go fast and turn this into a high-possession game, I think that spells doom for Florida. So, I mean, I'm sorry to make this like the human element here. I know you're asking for a college football expert,
No.
but is Miami conditioned enough? And don't tell me like, oh, they're in Miami, they're used to it. No, nobody is used to a Saturday game speed game until you get out there and play it.
Right.
Like that's why you go through the really, really hard workouts to make sure that that feels a little bit easier. So is Miami ready to play at that speed? And is Mario Cristobal forever giving us the impression that he is just white-knuckling the steering wheel, keeping that thing right at the speed limit? Is he ready to hit the gas? For Florida, to me, is going to come down to what they're able to do running the football, because I think that they need to be able to run the football into the middle of the line of scrimmage with some success, because this is a Miami team that while they have tremendous talent on both sides of the ball, I think the interior of the defensive line is a little bit of like your Achilles heel here. Excellent edge rushers, excellent linebackers. But if you can get those like 4 or 5 yards on first down, it really opens things up, makes life easier for Graham Mertz, where he might be able to take a couple deep shots down the field. I do not think Florida is special at the wide receiver position, but I think that they've got enough so that if you overcommit to stopping the run, they can burn you for the explosive play. So how fast will Mario let Miami go? Can Florida run the ball? Those are going to be the things I'm really looking for. And honestly, we'll probably know by halftime the way that that's going to play out.
Yeah, I am. That is as much of a bellwether game for this league. I actually think in the first week of the season, and this is all an extension of the first week, 3 of the 5 most important games from a league perspective will be played, including North Carolina at Minnesota, because one of the ways a league builds a reputation is, how did your middle of the pack schools go? How did they fare? And this is essentially the middle of the ACC against the middle of the Big Ten. It is a.
It might be worse. I mean, like, it might be worse for the ACC because it might be the 8th best ACC team and the 13th best Big Ten team.
Okay. Then don't lose North Carolina.
Right? Yeah. That's what I say about worse. The stakes are not even that you impress anyone with a win.
Oh yeah, well,
you can't lose. The worst position to be in.
What is your confidence level on the Tar Heels?
In this game, I actually do have a decent amount of confidence.
Do you?
I think that Minnesota is. I think Minnesota is a team that has a couple of players that can be real difference makers, and right now there's some availability questions around one of them. His name's Darius Taylor. He's a tremendous dual threat running back, somebody who can really make a lot of plays catching the ball out of the backfield or running it downhill. His availability has been in question, and to the point where even if he goes, I'm not even sure whether I would deem him as 100%. So, I think that to call it back to FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more,
right.
I think that when you see this go from Minnesota narrow favorite to North Carolina narrow favorite, that's not because anyone has changed their opinion about North Carolina. I think that's because there is enough smoke to consider Minnesota might not quite be at 100%. I also think that North Carolina is going to understand on both sides of the ball its strengths and weaknesses and what it needs to do. If North Carolina can block Minnesota up front,
right,
then they'll be able to dictate things. And I think that if Minnesota struggles to block Minnesota up front, they at least have enough dynamic playmakers at the skill positions to try to make things easy, and a second quarterback option who showed that when he was healthy before he got dinged up in the bowl game, he is able to scoot a little bit and make some plays on the run. So I feel like North Carolina's got more answers to what Minnesota's going to present. Obviously, there's a lot of big question marks. Both teams have new defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
And for Minnesota, I think the loss of Joe Rossi, their defensive coordinator for last year, is a negative for Minnesota. And the way I view that team, he goes to Michigan State, and I think that he was respected throughout the Big Ten Conference by the coaches there. So I feel like a lot of question marks for both teams, but I bet North Carolina at least feels better in terms of knowing what that second move is or that counterpunch, which, to call back to the beginning of our conversation, it didn't look like Florida State had its counterpunch ready, and I expect the Tar Heels will.
All right, I expect we're going to see more of Max Johnson, but if Connor Harrell is the guy, then Manny's the sharpest dressed guy quarterback in the entire country. We talked about fashion. His dad made his fit for ACC football kickoff. His dad is a custom clothier.
I guess I can guess his favorite route.
Okay, let's hear it.
Route.
Oh, what route? You faded out.
The seam.
Oh my gosh. Yes, the seam. Oh my. I thought you might say button hook, but I don't even know if they call it a button hook anymore. Oh my gosh. All right, final thing for you, Chip. What is success for Clemson against Georgia?
Moving the football. You know, if Carson Beck goes out there and like I think Clemson has the best defense in the ACC, but they are not a defense that has proven future pros all over the place. They are, like a one or two, twisted ankles or, pulled hammies away from putting some true freshmen at cornerback.
Right.
If Carson Beck goes out there and dices you up and we come out of it and saying, yeah, that's right, that is going to be the first guy taken in next year's NFL draft, then you know what? Like, that's just an elite player at quarterback on the number one team in the country. But even with Georgia's defense being as good as it is, if Clemson is hopeless, then that is the worst result possible, both in terms of the way they are viewed, the way they are talked about, and sort of how they move forward themselves. Because I'm working on a feature right now on Cade Klubnik, and everybody says there's been a lot of growth. There is also a message inside that building that everything is like ... but he has to put it together. Because there's a lot of examples of Cade Klubnik's worst plays where the responsibility comes down to Cade Klubnik. He made the wrong read. He didn't take care of the ball. He did the one thing in the red zone that you could not do. And so he's had a great spring. He's had a great fall camp. And his teammates on the defensive side are buzzing about what the offense could be. It is down to Cade Klubnik to go out there and execute. He was a 5-star prospect for a reason. He has a lot of athletic tools, but he has got to make the right decisions when the bullets are flying, and the bullets will be flying at about as high a speed as you're going to get all year going up against Georgia's defense. So success for Clemson is moving the football.
Isn't it amazing that that's where we are with a program that won 2 national championships in a 3-year span and played for, 2 others? That was, we actually had legitimate discussions. Has Clemson and Dabo Swinney overtaken Alabama and Nick Saban? I mean, legitimate discussions were had, and it just seemed like it went the other way real fast. We've probably talked about the reasons for that. It's just incredible that we have essentially laid the bar not on the ground for Clemson, but we didn't put it very high. We basically said, don't get steamrolled. And that is success. That's how far. Maybe that's more about Georgia than it is about Clemson. Chip Patterson, CBSSports.com, Cover 3 podcast moderator. Who's winning the Big Ten?
Ohio State.
Who's winning the SEC?
Georgia.
Who's winning the Big 12?
Oklahoma State.
I heard some dissenting opinion on a recent Cover 3 podcast about the quality of Oklahoma State. I'll let people go listen and hear that conversation. My friend, thank you very much. Appreciate your underwear.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.
All right, man. People are going to take that statement out of context, and I'm okay with it. I'm all right with it. Chip starts out those podcasts with live commercials.
Oh, okay.
And I'm riveted.
Yeah.
I'm riveted by
love it.
by ball security.